Good evening. Let's start with our motivation. So, between last week and this week, we didn't die. So, many other people have died in that short period of time. But we had one more week to practice the Dharma, to purify our mind, to create merit, to plant lots of seeds of the teachings in our mind. So that was a great fortune to rejoice at. But not to take it for granted, because who knows in one more week or two more weeks what will happen. Because our death is definite, but the time is indefinite. And so knowing this, there's no space to kind of muck around do and get involved in attachment and aversion and all sorts of unworthwhile things. Because when the time of death arrives, we have to be ready to go right then. So to prepare for that, we have to keep our mind in the Dharma as much as possible right now, and to monitor our mind, what it thinks about. So that if we notice non-virtuous thoughts, or even neutral thoughts that are useless, then to notice those and shift our mind into a virtuous mental state. So this is one meaning of living in the moment, paying attention to the present. So with that kind of awareness, then let's shift our mind into the most virtuous mental state, the bodhicitta motivation, aiming for a full awakening for the benefit of all beings. And let's have that be our motivation for sharing the teachings this evening. So last week we were looking for that present moment that we're supposed to live in. Remember? And when you're looking at something that is in the process of arising, half of it has arisen and half has not arisen. And so the arising is somewhere in between those two, but it is gone into the past in the next moment, and there's a new moment of arising. Yeah. So to find this exact present moment where we live in is quite difficult, and yet it's there all the time, isn't it? Yeah. And so we always hear about living in the present moment, and people don't understand that very well. Yeah, there's a story that you find told in Western Buddhist magazines where they completely get the wrong conclusion. The story about the guy who's walking near the edge of the cliff and fell off, and there's monsters or alligators below ready to eat him, and he grabs onto a branch as he's falling and holds onto that branch, and there's a strawberry there, but a rat is eating the branch that he's holding onto, and there's the strawberry, and and the way it's often taught in America is like, enjoy the present moment and taste the strawberry and just be delighted by it. That's what it means to live in the present moment. No. What that story is about is you're sitting there hanging on, you're on the way down, and why are you distracting your mind over a stupid strawberry? Yeah, when you need to prepare your mind to die because this rat is eating the branch and you're going to fall. Yeah, so prepare your mind to die and, give up everything that you're clinging on to so that when you go, you just go with a happy mind, without a mind that's like, but I want that strawberry. Yeah. Okay, so the death awareness is quite a they say if we keep that in our mind, then, or they say if we don't keep it in our mind in the morning, we waste the morning. If we don't keep it in our mind in the afternoon, we waste the afternoon. And if we don't keep an awareness of death in the evening, we waste the evening. So just like that happened unexpectedly, so death comes like that, when we least expect it. And, to be ready to go at that time. So that means, every moment of our life having a virtuous mental state. Because if that time comes to die and our mind is in a non-virtuous state, that non-virtuous state is what's going to make some non-virtuous karma ripen. Yeah? So, it's something of utmost importance to really monitor our mind and what kind of thought is going on in my mind right now. And like I was saying at the BBC today, you monitor that thought and you monitor the impulse to do an action and you pause and you think, what result is saying that going to have? What result is doing that going to have? Instead of just being so full of the emotional energy that we feel. You know how it is when a strong emotion comes up. It's like, I've got to say that, I've got to do that, But learning to calm that down. And no, we don't have to say that. We don't have to do that. Yeah, we pause, we think. Yeah, what's my motivation for saying or doing that? What's going to be the immediate result? What's going to be the long-term result? Yeah, and really thinking about things so that we make conscious decisions. Because if we do that, we will wind up in far fewer messes in our life. Because if you think, how many messes have you gotten yourself into simply by not monitoring what's going on in your mind, and instead these words come out, or the actions get done, and then there you are with results. I was just reading, there was one in the town, right next to the town where I grew up. There was a murder last weekend, or no, in the middle of the week, sometime in the last week. And she thinks the MGM lion. So there was a murder. It was outside a bar. So, you know, one young man was coming out, and there was an off-duty LA cop there. I don't know what happened, but the off-duty cop, who's in his 30s, an ex-Marine, shot this other guy who was 23 years old. And then he apparently called his father, and his father drove him from Southern California to El Paso, Texas, taking a fugitive across state lines. So this is a cop, and he knows what he's getting his father into by asking his father to do that. And he's, you know, he's just fleeing, yeah? And I was thinking about that, you know? There was one moment in time, and, you know, I mean, obviously alcohol was involved, but one moment in time, and he's not monitoring his mind, and then he took out this gun and killed somebody, and now he's scared to death because he knows that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. Yeah? Because, and he's scared for himself, but is he even thinking about the person he killed and how that person feels being dead and deprived of his life, and how the family of the other person feels, you know, mourning their brother and son and everything? And, you know, for that one moment of not thinking, of just, you know, the impulse arising, everything in his life is now different. So, you know, either he's going to be a fugitive his whole life and never have any peace, or he'll probably be incarcerated the rest of his life. And so you ruin the other person's life, one person died, you ruin your own life, you know, because of not thinking, yeah? And just that impulse coming. So this is what we, you know, we have to really take care about. Because small you know, things that happen in a small moment can have huge impacts, not only on our life, but on the lives of many other people. Yeah. Okay, so just, it's good to pause. You know, I might be feeling something intensely. That's nice. Sit, pause, breathe. Yeah. What is this mental state about? How am I going to deal with it? Yeah, instead of just, yeah. Okay, so it takes practice. That's why we call it practice the Dharma. But, you know, they say practice makes perfect. So, yeah, the more we do it, the more it just becomes a habit, and it becomes easier as it goes. Okay, verse 369. We are getting towards the end, slowly. So since the process of production is the arising of the produced through cessation, that which is presently being produced appears to be a different entity. So this is refuting the assertion that a thing which exists by its own nature, before it arises, is what is in the process of arising. So we have still the same question as last week. What is it that's in the process of arising? Okay, because the sprout is growing. The sprout is in the process of arising. Okay, the child is in the process of getting born, whatever it is. Yeah, well, that one, well, still it's difficult, but especially, you know, something coming from the future into the present, yeah, then what exactly is it that's coming? Yeah, what is it that is doing this action of approaching arising or approaching birth? Yeah. Do we have a different name for it when it's in the womb before the baby's born? Is it, at what point, I mean, it's a fetus for a long time. When does it stop being a fetus? Huh? Embryo, fetus. So it's a fetus until it's born, and at that point it becomes a baby. So, you know, what is it that's being born? Is the fetus being born? Is the baby being born? What is it that is arising? Yeah? People don't say, I'm having a fetus. They say, I'm having a baby. But they say, I'm having a baby even when it's an embryo, before it's a baby, don't they? Yeah? But then once the contractions start, you know, when is that actual moment of birth? Yeah? And what is it that's getting born? Okay, so Joe Blow says, if the half that is produced is not in the process of production, remember, you know, because half is produced and half's not produced. Okay, so if that half that's produced isn't in the process of production, what is? Okay, since the process of production is the sprouts arising through the cessation of the seed, something in a state where it is arising has begun, something in a state where its arising has begun is said to be in the process of arising. Thus, what is presently being produced appears to be a different entity from that which is half produced and half unproduced. Okay, so he's saying, you know, that there's something that's a different entity than what is half produced and half unproduced, and that's the thing that's in the process of arising. Okay? And it's arising from its own side. Yeah, it's inherently arising. So Aryadeva says, if you could point to something and say, this has been produced from this thing which is in the process of production. Yeah, you could identify something in the process of production that's inherently existing in relation to the thing produced from it. However, can you say this has been produced from this thing which is in the process of arising? No, that's getting the time all mixed up, isn't it? Okay? So, you know, this guy who's saying that when the production is going on, it's half produced, half unproduced, you know? So he said the half that has already been produced is not in the process of arising, yeah? But somehow he's also trying to say that whatever it is that's arising is also, that thing is also, you know, producing that thing that has been already produced. So it doesn't make sense. Does it? You know? He's getting his things all confused. So 370, when a thing is produced, there cannot be anything in the process of production. Okay? If the produced is in the process of production, why is it being produced? So this is following on from what this previous guy said. Okay? So we're continuing here to refute the assertion that a thing before it arises is what is in the process of arising. Because that sounds good, doesn't it? Before it arises, the thing which hasn't arisen yet, before it arises, is what's in the process of arising. That makes sense, doesn't it? Right? Yeah? So what exactly is that thing that hasn't arisen yet that's in the process of arising? Okay? Because when, as the verse says, when a thing is produced, yeah, there cannot be anything in the process of production. You know, and if the produced, what's already arisen, is in the process of production, why is it being produced? Okay? So when a thing, the first two lines, when a thing has arisen, there can't be anything in the process of arising from its own side, because what was in the process of arising has ceased. Okay? So when that half has already arisen, you know, then what is in the process of arising? Okay? Because what was in the process of arising the previous moment has already ceased and it's already arisen. Okay? The produced thing that has arisen from such a process of production and which would permit its inference doesn't exist. I don't know what that means. Okay, so then Joblo says the produced is in the process of production. Yeah. So then the question is, well, then why is it produced again? It's already arisen. So if the half that's produced is in the process of production, it doesn't make any sense because it's already there. If the unproduced is in the process of production, how is it getting produced if it exists from its own side as unproduced? Because remember also that these other people say that the unproduced is permanent. Yeah, and that the unarisen thing doesn't exist yet. So you can't, you know, for them, you can't say the sprout is arising, because for the sprout to arise, it's got to be there. Otherwise, the sprout is the unproduced. Yeah, so if it's the unproduced, then it can't be the thing that is arising at that very moment. Yeah, if it's unarisen, it's not in the process of arising. Then what exactly is in the process of arising? You know, this is the point. What are you going to point to? What in the world can you point to that's in the process of arising? Yeah. So 371, a thing in the process of production, so a thing in the process of arising, is said to be entirely unproduced arising. Okay. Since there is no difference, why should the pot not be considered as non-existent? Okay, so this is refuting the assertion that the unarisen is what is in the process of arising. Okay? So we keep coming back. You know, many of these points we keep coming back to it. The arisen can't be in the process of arising because it's already arisen. But so then we keep saying, well, it's the unarisen that's in the process of arising. Yeah. So Joblo again says, a thing that is presently being produced, a thing that is presently arising, is said to be produced. Yeah. So it's presently arising, but it's said to be produced. Yeah. For although unproduced, it is approaching production. So he's saying something's in the process of arising. Okay? So the thing that is presently being produced is said to be produced, because you have to have a thing there that's already attained its own entity that is in doing the action of arising if things inherently exist. Okay. For although unproduced, it is approaching production. But how can it already be produced and then still be unproduced and approaching production? It can't, okay? So Aryadeva says, if a thing in the process of being produced is said to be produced, because even though it's entirely unproduced, it's approaching production, okay? So are you following what he's saying? Then why shouldn't a pot, while performing its function, be considered a non-functioning thing? Okay? So if the thing being produced is non-existent or permanent, and yet it still performs the function of arising, then why can't a pot also be a permanent functioning thing? Okay? So this is reasonable, since you say there is no difference between produced and unproduced. That's the crux of the matter, because this guy's saying it's arising, so it's already produced, but it's unproduced, and so that's how it's arising. You know? So he's getting everything totally confused. Okay. I like that. If a thing in the process of being produced, so it's in the process of arising, is said to be produced, that means it's already arisen. And why do you say it's already arisen? Because even though it's entirely unproduced, which means it hasn't arisen, it is approaching production, because you have to have something you can point to that exists from its own side that's performing that action. When you talk within the scope of inherent existence. Yeah? So you can see that these arguments don't make any sense. Yeah? It's like the dead person is in the process of dying. That's what it's like saying, yeah. Who's dying? Well, the person, you know, who's dying is dead, yeah, but they're also so they're also dying because we need somebody to be dying who, yeah, yeah, it's like ridiculous, okay? So 372, that which is presently being produced, though incomplete, is other than the unproduced, okay? So they're coming on again, you know. Okay, whatever is being produced, although it's not completely produced, it's incomplete, it is other than unproduced. Okay? Which means if it's other than unproduced, then it means it must be produced. Which means it's already there. Yet, also, since other than produced, okay, so it must be produced. But it's also other than produced. So if it's other than produced, it must be unproduced. Okay. Then the unproduced is being produced. Okay. So Joe Blow's saying there's a difference between what is in the process of being produced and the unproduced. Okay? So there's a difference between what's in the unproduced and what's in the process of being produced. That which is in the process of production is said to be associated with the activity of production. Remember, because there has to be something that's doing that action of production. Whereas the unproduced isn't necessarily associated with the activity of production, because the unproduced isn't arising. So only the thing that is arising is associated with the activity of production. Okay? But then in the verse he says, you know, that which is presently being produced, okay, although incomplete, is other than the unproduced. So it must be already produced. Yet, since it's other than the produced, because the production hasn't been complete, then that means it must be the unproduced also. So then the unproduced is being produced. Yeah. But the unproduced can't arise because it's permanent. Okay. Even my tree got confused by that one. Okay. So you say that since a thing in the process of being produced is associated with the activity of production, even though it hasn't completed that activity, it is other than the unproduced and the future. However, since a thing in the process of being produced is other than something produced, the unproduced is being produced. Okay, so we're back to where we were before. What is it that's being produced? It's not the unproduced, because that's permanent according to this system. And also it doesn't exist. So because the future is non-existent, so the future object can't be in the process of arising because the non-existent can't perform a function like arising. Okay? So it's not the unproduced that is being produced. It's not the produced because that doesn't need to be produced again. Okay? So whenever you assert inherent existence, you run into these kind of conundrums. Because with inherent existence, you have to be able to point to something that is that object. Whereas when you talk about nominal existence, there's not the requirement to be able to point to something that is that object. Because nobody's saying that there's something that is that object from its own side. Whereas with inherent existence, somebody is saying there's something that is that object from its own side. Okay? So 373. That which is presently being produced, though not yet existent, is later said to exist. So the unproduced is thus being produced, but the non-existent does not arise. Okay, so if you're saying that which is presently being produced, though not yet existent, because the future objects don't exist yet. So you can't say the future object is being produced, is being produced because it doesn't exist yet. It's not the one that's approaching production. If that thing that isn't existent now, when it's arising, is later said to exist, how does that happen? Because this thing is permanent. So how does it become an impermanent existing thing? Okay, so if a future object is permanent and non-existent, then how is that future object going to come into being? Because the non-existent does not arise. Okay, so this is about the necessity of accepting that the unarisen is arising if that which is in the process of arising is arising from its own side. Okay, so if something that's arising is arising from its own side, then you have to accept that the unarisen is what's in the process of arising. But the unarisen is permanent, so how can it arise? Okay? Since that which is presently being produced is other than something produced, you must agree that it is unproduced. Okay? Because something can either be produced or unproduced. We've already refuted some kind of middle. Okay? So you say something is in the process of being produced. You say that something in the process of being produced exists as a thing, because even though it didn't exist before, it has later become associated with the activity of production. So even though as a future object it didn't exist, when it becomes associated with the activity of production, it exists. Yeah. But again, how did it go from being non-existent to being existent? Because permanent things can't change like that, okay? If you say that an entirely unproduced thing associated with the activity of production is being produced, that doesn't make sense. Right on. An unproduced thing is non-existent and hasn't attained its entity, meaning it isn't there. So it can't undergo production because it's not engaged in that activity of being produced like you say it is, okay, because it's non-existent. Okay. So, but it's really something to sit and think about, you know, exactly what is arising and what is being produced. Yeah? Something we want to say, well, there it is in the future, and then blip, now it's in the past moment, but somehow in the middle it went from being non-existent because it hasn't arisen to being non-existent because it already ceased. But it changed in the middle and was existent for a short moment. Okay, 374. The completed is called existent. The uncompleted is called non-existent. Okay, so what has been produced is called the existent, and what has not yet been produced, the uncompleted part of the arising, is called non-existent. When there is nothing in the process of production, because there's no middle moment there, what is being referred to as such? So what are we saying is in the process of production? When there's nothing in the process of production because we can't find that moment. Okay, so this is summarizing the meaning. Something that has completed the action of production exists as a thing. It's already arisen. That which has not performed the activity of production doesn't exist as a thing. It's permanent, it's non-existent according to people who believe in inherent existence. If neither of them, that which has or has not completed the activity of production, if neither of those is in the process of being produced, then what in the world is presently being produced? Anything in the process of being produced doesn't have the least existence from its own side. That's the point. Okay? It's a good summary verse. Yeah? It's a very good summary verse. Which actually means saying it's good means I understand it. It's bad means I don't understand it. That doesn't make much sense either. That's not a very good reason. Then 375, since without a cause there is no effect, both starting and stopping are not feasible. Okay, so this is a concluding summary of the refutations of inherent existence. So investigation with reasoning shows that there is no effect without a cause. But we know that already, you think. Since cause and effect don't truly exist, and the basis, in other words, the things which are arising and ceasing, therefore don't truly exist, the sprouts starting to be produced and the seeds stopping to exist are not feasible from their own side. Okay? So since since cause and effect don't truly exist, and therefore the things, the sprout that's arising, the seed that's ceasing, these things don't truly exist, then the sprout starting to be produced and the seed stopping to exist cannot exist from their own side, because you can't find any of these things. So then there's a sutra quotation. Sentient beings, humans, those born from power, whoever they may be, none that were born and died here were born inherently. Or just take out the inherently, because I put that's in the parentheses. None that were born and died here were born. Yeah. And you could also say, none that were born and died here died. Yeah. So there's no findable person that was born, and there's no findable person that died. So if that's the case, what are we rejoicing at birth, and what are we crying about at death? If there's no findable person who's doing either of those activities. So the sutra quote continues, the nature of all things is empty, like magician's illusions. But the non-Buddhist Forders are unable to recognize that. So everything's empty, like a magician's illusion. So a magician's illusion, it appears so real, you're sure. They say that when the magicians of old, with their eye ointment and their mantra spell, they would have some sticks and stones in ancient India, and with the ointment and the spell, cast something, and those sticks and stones would appear like horses and elephants, like real horses and elephants, So then imagine yourself, you're sitting there, and right there is a horse and an elephant prancing around doing all these things. You're going to react to that. Oh my God, there's an elephant. There is an elephant in the room. Yeah. There is an elephant in the room. There is a horse in the room. Yeah. It appears that real. Yeah. And to the people, who are under the influence of the spell, who don't know how magic works, they totally believe that there is an elephant in the room. Okay. The magician sees the elephant, but he knows there's no real elephant. So the appearance is there for him, but he knows it's not a real elephant. He knows the appearance is false. Somebody who arrives later doesn't even see anything and says, why are you guys making such a big deal? There's only sticks and stones here. Yeah? So ordinary sentient beings are like the audience who are under the spell. We see inherent existence, we grasp onto it, we believe it. And therefore, everything becomes so solid to us. So solid. What this person said is cast in concrete. What I feel is cast in concrete. Everything is so solid. Okay? That's how we ordinary beings are, The magician who has the appearance but doesn't believe it is like somebody who has realized emptiness in the break time after they've come out of their meditation session. So things still appear truly existent to them, but they know it's a false appearance because they've realized emptiness. Okay. Then Aryas who are in meditative equipoise, for them, there's not even the appearance of inherently existent things or of any kind of conventional objects whatsoever, at all. All that appears to them is emptiness. And emptiness appears non-dually. So they don't have a feeling when that here's me and I'm realizing emptiness. Don't ask me what that feels like. I can't even imagine it. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to feel good. Yeah, for sure that. Okay. So that's like the person who comes along later. There's no appearance of true existence. There's no grasping at true existence. They're not, whatever is appearing is like, what's the big deal to them? Yeah. Okay. I love these kind of verses. Sentient beings, humans, those born from power, whoever they may be, none that were born and died here were born. Yeah, we see all these people who are here, but none of them were born from their own side. There's no truly existent people that were born. But it's so stark when they say they weren't born. It makes you go like that. When we always put inherently in to make it clear. We don't know what inherently means. Oh yeah. The none that were born here and died, they weren't born inherently. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's true. We have no clue what that means. That's why they usually leave out the inherently, because then that wakes us up. Oh, what do you mean they weren't born? If they weren't born, how come they're here? Yeah, but who exactly was born? The one that's here now wasn't born. The one that was in the womb wasn't born.
I have the same feeling when we do the Heart Sutra. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no form. I'm like, well, what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, it really, it shocks you. That's why in so many of the sutras, like the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, they only put the inherently or the qualification like one time in the sutra, and then the rest of the time it's up to you to understand that it's being carried through. But it leaves it out because it's so shocking to you that it makes you think about it, And the same in Nagarjuna's Karikas. He leaves the inherently out, I mean, his first verse, something's not produced from self, from other, from both, or causelessly. Huh? What in the world is this guy talking about? If it's not produced in any of those ways, how is it here? So he gets your attention, and then you have to figure out what he means. Okay? So we say, I'm born, but who is born? It's interesting, isn't it? We say, I was born. But who was the I that was born? Yeah. And who is the one who dies? And when do birth and death actually occur? Are they moments along a continuum that we pick out and designate? Or are they inherently existent events? Okay, so people conjured by a magician cause the People conjured by a magician cause the spectators of the magic show who think they are people to feel attraction and aversion. Yeah, because they're always talking about like somebody, they always talk about some guy who falls in love with a woman he dreams about, you know, and yet that woman is non-existent. So same thing here, you know, somebody got conjured and you think that it's a real person. So then either you feel attraction to them or you can't stand their guts. But they're not even a real person. It's like getting mad at your Raggedy Ann doll or getting attached to your Raggedy Ann doll thinking it's a real person. Okay, they appear to the magician, but he doesn't think of them this way because he knows they're false. And they don't even appear to those who come later and are unaffected by the spell. Okay, so these analogies apply respectively to first the perception of common beings who have not understood dependent arising's emptiness of inherent existence. Okay, so common beings who are seeing things that are dependent arising but are not understanding that they lack inherent existence. So those are the common beings who see the horses and elephants. Second, to the wisdom of subsequent attainment of the Aryas. And some people say even somebody who has realized emptiness inferentially when they come out of it, they still have that strong feeling of, you know, this is a false appearance. And then third is to the meditative equipoise and emptiness of the Aryas, because to them conventional phenomena do not appear, nor do they take them to be inherently existent. Okay? So we're advised, learn how conventional phenomena are established by conventional, reliable cognizers, and ultimate truths by conceptual and non-conceptual reasoning consciousnesses. Okay, and you can learn this from Shantideva, yeah, and other texts. And then there's a quote from Shantideva. This is a very famous quote. The ultimate is not this mind's field of activity. This mind is asserted to be conventional. Okay, the ultimate is not this mind's field of activity. So what mind's field of activity? What mind does not see the ultimate truth?
Conventional, reliable cognizers.
Yeah, conventional, reliable cognizers don't see it. Yeah, and specifically here, sense consciousnesses. Yeah, especially sense consciousnesses. Okay, so the ultimate is not this mind's field of activity. This mind is asserted to be conventional. So what mind is asserted to be conventional? Okay, so it says the first line indicates the definition of ultimate truth. Okay, so it's something that is perceived, that exists, but is not perceived by a conventional valid cognizer. Okay. Line 2 is the definition of conventional truth. Mind in both lines is a mind that has dualistic appearance. So mind in the first line, the ultimate truth is not the field of activity of a mind that has dualistic appearance. Because, you know, the primary mind that realizes emptiness has got to be an Arya's wisdom. It is produced by, emptiness can be understood by, a conventional cognizer and an inference. But that's not the primary consciousness that it's not the chief consciousness that perceives emptiness. Okay? And then in the second phrase, this conventional mind is asserted to be conventional. Okay? So, yeah. So this is also said from the point of view of how its object is apprehended. The lack of inherent existence of persons and aggregates, okay, so the emptiness of persons and aggregates illustrates the ultimate truth. To the direct, reliable cognizer, directly cognizing that, yeah, it is not its field of activity in terms of dualistic appearance. In other words, it doesn't apprehend that emptiness dualistically. Yeah, so what this verse is saying is there's two ways to understand things. You either are understanding it in terms of what truth is being talked about in these two lines, or what mind is the cognizing or valid, the reliable cognizing mind in these two lines. Because according to what the truth is, you're going to have a different cognizing mind. And according to what the cognizing mind is, it's what the object that it perceives is going to be different. Okay? Because if you have a non-dualistic mind, the object's going to be emptiness. If you have a dualistic mind, the object is going to be a conventional truth. Okay? Except when we're talking about an inferential realization of emptiness. Okay? But that's because that inference isn't the chief mind that realizes it. Okay, so the lack of inherent existence of persons and aggregates illustrates the ultimate truth. To the direct, reliable cognizer, directly cognizing that, it is not its field of activity in terms of dualistic appearance. In other words, it doesn't apprehend this dualistically. Okay? So the valid, non-conceptual cognizer of emptiness does not apprehend emptiness dualistically. It's not saying, here I am. I've realized emptiness. Finally, I've got it. There isn't that going on, okay? It is that which is known by a direct, reliable cognizer apprehending it. Okay? So that's referring to the emptiness. Okay, so the person and the aggregates are conventional truths because for the direct, reliable cognizer explicitly cognizing them, they are cognized with dual appearance. So remember, you can either say they're conventional truths, so therefore they're cognized by a dualistic cognizer, or you can say there's a dualistic cognizer, therefore the object it's apprehending is a conventional truth. In other words, those two things are defined in terms of each other. Yeah, which is opposite than how we usually think about something. We usually think, here's the object, here's the subject, and then they bump into each other, right? So here's a valid object, yeah, here's a valid subject, and they contact each other. But how could that be? Because what makes this a valid object? And what makes this a valid subject? Yeah, they are defined in terms of each other, aren't they? But something in us doesn't feel completely comfortable with that. How can they only exist dependent on each other? Because then valid has to be inherently existent, doesn't it? When we say valid cognizer, that's why I use the word reliable, because to me the word valid has so much the implication of it is true from its own side. Whereas reliable doesn't have that implication to me. So that's why I changed I don't use the term that everybody else uses there. Yeah? Because something becomes a reliable cognizer in dependence upon a reliable object, and that becomes a reliable object in dependence upon being cognized by a reliable cognizer. But we feel so uncomfortable with that, but there's no other way to posit it.
So this is mutual dependence.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It's the mutual dependence is the only way to posit it. There's no other way to do it. Because any other way to do it, you would have to have an inherently existent valid object. Well, what makes that inherently existent valid object valid? It exists validly from its own side. But how can something exist validly from its own side? It can't. It's only a valid object when it's, in a whole relationship with all these other things. Yeah, and that's why you can't call this a giraffe, because it doesn't function like one. Okay? So there's a summarizing stanza. Arising and disintegrating of composite things are like dreams and like illusions. When they are mere terms and mere designations, how could non-arising things be truly existent? Okay, so arising and disintegrating of composite things. Composite things means things consisting of parts. Yeah, so anything that has parts, automatically it can't be truly existent because it's dependent on its parts. And you can't find it in its parts. So it's like a dream and an illusion. Yeah. When they are mere terms and mere designations, yeah, because there's no inherently existent thing in that basis of designation. Yeah, so that object, we say it's mere designation or mere term. That doesn't mean it's a sound or a word. But there's no other way to say it exists than that there's a label there. Yeah, without there being some designation process, you can't say a thing exists because it's not there in the basis. Yeah, it's absolutely not there in the basis. So in order to say it exists, there has to be this process of designation. Okay, so if that's the case, then how could non-arising things that haven't arisen from their own side, be truly existent? They can't. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 15. Phew. Okay, so chapter 16 will start next week, but it's called Refuting Remaining Counter-Arguments, Settling the Procedure Between Spiritual Mentors and Students by Explaining the Purpose of the Chapters and Eliminating Remaining Counter-Arguments by Misguided Opponents. Okay, so anything that hasn't been refuted before, we're going to get it now. Okay? Okay, so this is where we are. Okay. This is amazing stuff, isn't it?
It's amazing that we're having even any contact with it. That's amazing.
Yeah. It is.
I'm too stupid to get it. It is amazing, but that we're having contact with it is amazing.
Yeah.
Introduced to it. That we're
Yeah.
able to think about it. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Just, I mean, yeah. I mean, how many people get to understand Jay Rinpoche's teaching, or just hear Jay Rinpoche's teachings in this life?
I think getting to understand was a little bit over the top.
Yeah, but just even hearing Jay Rinpoche's teachings, you know. So you are very fortunate.
I have to say, for the first time last week, I had a feeling of joy to come to the teaching. I never had that before.
Yeah,
Like, oh yes, the teaching.
yeah,
It started.
yeah. So you see how if you stick it out, the mind transforms. Yeah, now you have that experience. So remember that.
Just as an aside, when Geshe Take was here, I was asking him the question that we had many months ago about with these horses appearing, could we smell them, could we pat them and touch them?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer was, well, it's just our level of attachment, so probably. We see this, we smell it, we hear it, and we get the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we're getting the whole thing all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wouldn't just be an appearance of an elephant, but
And the rest of the sense consciousness is
don't function. No, it's the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The verse 375. In that verse, that kind of describes the argument of no beginning to existence in that one verse. Because it says,
Yeah.
without a cause there is no effect. Both starting and stopping are not feasible.
Yeah.
So in a way it seems that verse describes a
Mm.
non-starting and non-stopping continuum.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's specifically meant about when we're thinking like somebody's born in samsara or somebody dies in samsara. But yeah, definitely, you're never going to come to a first cause. Yeah. Impossible. Impossible. Yeah. Because what is it that's arising if there's a first cause? Yeah, then you're really lost. Okay, shall we dedicate?
Never petted a meerkat before.
You what?
I never petted a meerkat
A
before.
meerkat, right? Are you a real cat?
Or a meerkat.
She feels, you get all the senses there,
Oh, yeah.
don't you?
Nice and soft.
Yeah. But there's no cat there. I mean, really look, there is no cat there. If you look within that body, there is no cat.
I know cat.
Yeah.
Neither does she.
The only kind of cat you've ever petted.
Yeah.